Voting by mail is a quick and easy way to make your voice heard in this election.
We are seeing a lot of public figures on the media trying to sell us on the idea of voting by mail. Actually, it is illegal. Article 2 of the U.S. Constitution says, "The Congress may determine the time of choosing the electors, and the day on which they shall give their votes, which day shall be the same throughout the United States." So our supreme and prevailing law says that voting must happen on one day. To gather or count ballots for one election on more than one day is an act of treason. It is rather obvious why voting has been subject to special and strict processes. The idea of tampering with elections is nothing new. To our founding fathers, it was obvious that to have the slightest hope of handling the ballots properly, they had to be managed in a way they could not be fiddled with in secret by unidentified parties. Most states developed a system where ballots were put in a locked box by the voter, and only under public witness could the box be unlocked and the ballots be counted. Often, each ballot was read aloud, as eyewitnesses would verify what was called out. This was not for ceremony. This was the only way the vote could be kept honest, fair, and credible. When you mail in your ballot, you have no idea who is handling, counting, or not counting it. When you mail in your ballot, you are unraveling a long and distinguished history of voting integrity. The idea is that if you wish, even you can witness and verify the counting of ballots. We are being told that mailing in our ballots is a good way to avoid the hazards of contagious disease. But of course, if we don't gather, shop, and travel, then we destroy our economy, and we fail to develop immunities. And visiting a voting office is no more risky than many other things we must do to keep our economy afloat and keep society functioning. Voting by mail is a perfect example of how we give up our security for a little convenience. In the 2016 election, over 20% of the ballots were mailed in. In 7 states, more than half the ballots were mailed in, enough to completely decide the election in those states. That is putting a huge amount of trust into a system that, in 2016, was riddled with accusations of election tampering. When we mail in our ballots, we have no right to raise questions of election tampering. We are asking for it. A completely transparent voting process was difficult to create, and voting systems probably can never be perfect, but it was a major priority in our country's history to try and keep elections honest, transparent, and open to everybody. Voting by mail eliminates the system that was created for that singular purpose of having a voting process that allows us to have confidence in the outcome. Some of the issues we vote for are strongly opposed by government. Is it any wonder that government would like us to see a voting system that they can manipulate and control? There is an old expression, a kind of joke. The question is, who will win the election? The answer is, whoever counts the ballots. That is why we have to witness the process from start to finish. How do we maintain access and transparency in this new voting by mail system? It's impossible. So the fact that government seems to be pushing this new system raises very serious suspicions of why they would be pounding this drum. In 2018, Princeton University released a study showing that voting no longer has any appreciable effect on public policy. As they say, if voting mattered, they would not allow us to do it. We have a serious disconnect between popular consensus and public policy. Voting by mail is just another way to disconnect the voter from public policy even further, and policymakers seem to want it that way. So by voting by mail, we may prevent disease, but we will also prevent democracy. We never had any pandemic from people voting, ever, so let's stop kidding ourselves. Voting by mail is just a way to allow government to control something they should not be controlling. Maybe we need to look at whether we should even use voting at all to make public policy, because voting is just the majority violating the rights of the minority. Voting is mob rule. Voting is taking something from your neighbor by force of the state. Voting is 2 wolves and a sheep deciding what they'll have for dinner. We know in a free society we are not supposed to have rulers, but what do we have? Majority rule. That sounds like we have a ruler. When we decide our policies, instead of starting with majority rule, we need to start with protecting people's rights, every last person's rights, not violating someone's rights to please the majority. We have lost so many of our rights. Look at the Bill of Rights. Nearly all 10 of them is gone or disregarded by officials. All our new public policies seem to do is protect the power and wealth of government. What about us? Now we need policies that protect us and our rights against the abuses and excesses of government for a change. We have the partisan expressions, Black Lives Matter, it's okay to be white. We have these divisive slogans. But how about a slogan that is not divisive, that protects everyone? The slogan that would be something like, individual rights first and public policy comes second. The fundamental element of society is the individual. Groups are just a bunch of individuals. Corporations, government, races, countries, political parties, these are just collections of individuals. When you protect the individual, you protect the group. When you protect the group, you violate the rights of the individual. When we protect your right to clean air, water, and food, we protect the environment. See how that works? Protect individual rights and you cover it all. When you do it the other way around, things go terribly wrong. You can protect the environment by killing all of us. When you do it backwards, you lose the concept that human life and rights should be protected. You fall into a dystopian hell of human sacrifice for some external objective. We can be confused about whether we are protecting the environment for our benefit or protecting the environment for the environment's benefit. It may seem altruistic to put the environment's needs above human needs, but it's rather nihilistic. If we forget to protect humans, we are betraying ourselves, our species, our society, and our groups. But to protect our rights, we have to understand what a right is. We have to know the difference between a right and a gift. A gift is something you get that someone else pays for. A right is something that you are allowed to pursue and attain for yourself without interference. Protecting people's rights is a fairly simple thing. It usually entails just removing some obstacle to our pursuit of happiness, and that obstacle is usually government. But these days, our government, our empire, is clearly in a state of decline. These days, it seems like all that government can focus on is self-preservation, self-enrichment, self-empowerment, self-protection. Government no longer troubles itself with protecting your rights and your freedoms. It wants more and more revenues, more and more censorship, more and more debt, more and more currency printed out of thin air. These are all clear indications of system decline and failure. Making you free does not make government rich, so what do you expect government is doing? The idea of freedom and individual rights actually clashes with the idea of government, wealth, force, and power. Government no longer protects your rights. It brings us crises and takes your rights away. The only rights you have today are the rights you claim, defend, and preserve for yourself. When you gain rights and freedoms, government thinks that it loses, because government no longer wins us with service, it wins us with force. But in this way, government makes itself worthless and expendable to us. We can now see that if we learn how to claim our rights and respect the rights of others, then we could throw out 9/10 of our public policies today. We could retire most of our armies, our police, our prisons, many of our courts, and most of those civic planners who are so busy behind closed doors deciding how we will behave, live, and comply. If we could simply rely on each other for justice, honor, and compassion, our problems would be solved, and there would be very little for government to do and collect taxes for. When we recognize ourselves as the fundamental element of society and that government is simply a dangerous appendage, we will see that there is no one out there who has any right to dictate anything to us as long as we are able to act responsibly and ethically. It is you and I who have the greatest power to make the world what it is, not government, not politicians, not lawmakers, not media. The world is what we make it. But nowadays, we must find ways to keep government out of our way until government is in its proper place as a servant and not as a ruler. As we see that bad decisions are harming us, we must start making decisions ourselves. We can no longer ask someone else to do things for us by voting for people who have no capacity to deliver their promises, or by signing petitions that no one ever responds to. We need not only to be the change, we need to make the change. It is the difference between wishing you had a ditch and actually moving a shovel. Government is that thing that keeps taking away our shovel, and we need to stop letting that happen. Whether you mail in your voting ballot or go to a polling place, you are giving government the shovel, telling government that it is they, not you, who will determine your future, your life, your opportunities. Presidents no longer matter. Legislators no longer matter. There is something else controlling things. It needs to be us. We need to do that today, and under those circumstances, voting no longer matters. I can pretty much promise you that mailing in a voting ballot will not improve your life in any way other than saving you a trip to the voting booth.
Thank you for watching and sharing Jerry Day's videos. If you're prepping or planning to put up some emergency food for long-term storage, please go to preparewithjerry.com, where you'll find top-quality food storage packages and kits to get you and your family through whatever ups and downs may be coming.